and just recognizing that you're just trying to capture a moment in time, and you're not trying to, make the final record of anything. We're all just sort of living in this world and experiencing, and this is just another vessel or venue to share the human experience together and to celebrate it.
Awesome, I love that.
This is the Self-Recording Band Podcast, the show where we help you make exciting records on your own, wherever you are, DIY style. Let's go.
Hello and welcome to the Self-Recording Band Podcast. I am your host, Benedikt Hein. If you are new to this show, welcome. So good to have you. If you are already a listener, welcome back. So grateful that you're spending time with us again today. If you don't know, this podcast is not just a podcast. It's also, there's also video on YouTube. So you can not just listen to this, you can also watch it. And if you're discovering it on YouTube, you can also check it out on Spotify or Apple Podcasts when you're on the go, whatever your favorite podcast platform is. Today, I'm super excited to be joined by Josh Rogosin, who is like one of my dream guests, honestly. And I think most of you will be familiar with his work because he created the iconic sound for the Tiny Desk concert series for over 800 recordings. And, he's collaborated with Fred again, Sting, Post Malone, Taylor Swift, countless others. Like, if you know Tiny Desk, all of them were there, basically. And he also introduced theater to the series, producing and engineering performances from Blue Man Group, Sesame Street, Wicked, The Lion King, and more. And this series has a massive audience and has turned into the holy grail and must-stop for every touring musician. It also hits the sweet spot for demographics, featuring every kind of music you can imagine. Again, most of you will probably be familiar with Tiny Desk because I know that our community was pretty excited for this interview. And Josh says he's learned so much about what makes it work so well. And I can't wait for him to share some of those insights with us here today. After 10 years of producing and engineering for Tiny Desk, Josh is starting his own show called Global Sound Concerts and his own production company. Global Sound Concerts is a music discovery and travel show that finds musicians where they are from to learn why being from the place inspires them to make music. He's produced a couple of episodes already and is planning to release them as a pilot season on his own YouTube page. I've already been able to watch one of these, and I can tell you it is totally amazing. And I have questions about it, so I'm very excited about that too. So now, without further ado, here is Josh Rogosin for you. Welcome, Josh. Thank you so much for taking the time and coming on our podcast today.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Benedikt.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks to Addie, our mutual friend who introduced us. This wouldn't have happened without him. So thank you, Eddie, for the introduction. I really appreciate that.
Indeed.
Awesome. Yeah. So, Josh, pretty exciting times, right? You're starting a new thing after Tiny Desk. Most people will be familiar with Tiny Desk. And I've got questions about both of them. Yes. But I'm sure you want to talk about the new thing as well. And I can't wait to hear more about that. So
yeah, of course.
Maybe let's just start with that one because I am curious. So can you tell us a bit beyond what I just said in the intro what this new thing is about?
Yes, so after 10 years of recording over 800 Tiny Desks, heard on YouTube over 1 billion times, I decided I wanted to branch off on my own, create my own music series, one of which is called Global Sound Concerts. And another series that will run parallel to it, which I haven't even told anyone about yet, is called Ghost Light Concerts. And basically, both shows revolve around traveling all over the world to find musicians where they're from, to learn why making music is so important to them from being from that place. So Global Sound Concerts can happen anywhere all over the world, as long as the musicians are from that location. And Ghost Light Concerts is a very similar thing, except, the ghost light is the light that they put out on the theater stage at the end of each performance, at least in the United States. I'm actually not sure how it works out around the rest of the world, but there's this superstition that the theater shall never remain dark. So the stagehands, after each performance, whether it's theater, opera, a music concert, they'll put out basically a lamp on stage with just a bare bulb, and the light from that lamp basically just illuminates the ghosts, so that everything stays safe and with good luck in the theater. So the idea would be to travel to iconic concert halls. So where are you located right now, Benedict?
I'm in the southeast of Germany, close to the Czech border and the Austrian border. So, southeast Bavaria.
So they probably have very famous concert halls not too far from where you live, whether it's, the Vienna Opera House or, in Berlin, there's
Munich.
probably a number of venues in Munich. Even if it's like, like here in Washington, D.C., we've got the 930 Club, which is this iconic venue for rock and roll musicians to tour through. So the idea would be to go to these venues, either record an intimate performance in the style of Tiny Desk, around a ghost light. It could be either on stage, it could even be in the audience, it could even be out front of the theater. I have in my mind, I'm actually heading to Australia, and I have in my mind, well, wouldn't it be cool to go to the Sydney Opera House, but not record something inside, maybe just outside around a ghost light with the gorgeous, iconic opera house as a backdrop. So the idea is to really emphasize what these venues are so that people who don't have the resources to travel to all these places and to go and hear all these venues, we can kind of celebrate and, publicize all the information about these venues and the types of programming that they have by recording an intimate concert that's really made for the internet. And that's the key here. There's so many concerts, like let's say at Madison Square Garden, they have the Wolfpack concert, and it's incredible. And actually, I based a lot of my camera decisions from that Wolfpack concert, because it's one camera on stage floating around as if it's like a little moth or a butterfly flittering around wherever's interesting. And I actually love that single point camera point of view. But the idea would be to capture the intimacy of a performance for the internet rather than just putting a concert that's happening in the venue on YouTube, which you see all the time. I find that there's a certain disconnect that happens with an online audience. Even watching Coachella on 4 YouTube channels, which is wonderful and incredible and inspiring, there's something about creating content that's made for the internet, and that the intimacy that Tiny Desk has sort of proliferated and made so successful. I think there's a way to capture more content that's directed directly for the internet watchers and listeners that isn't as distant and not as intimate as something created for the internet themselves.
Oh, yeah, totally.
So I know that I covered a lot right there.
Yeah, exactly what you're here for. So that's awesome. Thank you. So does that mean you are, if I understood correctly, you are not just doing the sound, you are also making the camera decisions. So you're producing it, not just the sound, you produce the whole thing, the visual too.
Yes, so I'm producing it, I'm directing it. So I've been traveling all over the world, traveling to different universities and audio recording programs and multimedia programs to give presentations, because a big part of what I want to be doing going forward is paying it forward, inspiring the next generation of creators and audio professionals that you don't necessarily need to start in a recording studio as an intern and work your way up. There's an exciting way to create content that has nothing to do, that has everything to do with just the intimacy that we're after.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's cool. That's
Lost my train of thought there.
No, that's totally cool. I love the idea of making it specifically for the online audience and realizing that it's different from what happens at the venue for a live audience. So that is actually one thing that I always wondered about the Tiny Desk series as well. And I know that we got a question about that actually too, where it's like, how much does I always wondered, like, how important is the audience there that's live versus like is that a priority? Is it just something that also happens? Is it just purely produced for the internet format? Like,
no,
I always wondered what it would sound like in the room for the people who are there, right? And how important that is even to you.
It's amazing. I mean, I have like binaural recordings of what it sounds like in the room when I had the Neumann KU100 head suspended in the air. So you actually hear what it actually sounds like if you just solo, my audience mics. But it's yeah, it's a far cry from what I make it sound like. Of course, multi-tracking everything and finessing everything. I think my main goal is to make it sound as realistic as possible, but to augment that stereo recording with direct lines and making decisions. If there's a musician that has this little lick, like it's a bass lick that Thundercat does, I want to go in and crank it so that it really pops out of the mix. And I am making very dramatic editorial decisions, but I want it to be in a very transparent kind of way, as if, oh, well, that's what it sounded like in the room, which in reality, that's nothing what it sounded like in the room. But to your point, having the live audience at Tiny Desk, and me as a theater person, I grew up performing, doing rock and roll musicals as a kid. Like I was Tommy and Tommy. I played Claude in Hair. I played Riff Raff in Rocky Horror Show. I was in Jesus Christ Superstar, all of those rock and roll musicals. So to me, it's extremely important that there is a live audience, even if we're filming something for the internet. For example, Global Sound concerts and now Ghostlight concerts, they will each have an in-person, 10 to 15 to 20 people there physically, because it really sparks something in the performer's imagination, and inspires something in their performance, because they're not performing in a void to a camera, which is sort of like with headphones on, right? It kind of sterilizes the whole process. So if you kind of up the stakes, as we would say, in other words, you make it a little bit scarier for the performer, because, oh, wait a minute, wow, this is actually a live performance. I can't just stop and start again. I'm not going to punch in and fix a shitty vocal. I'm not going to have any auto-tune on my voice. So it sort of it raises the stakes so that the performance becomes more authentic and organic, because they're not performing for the camera. And I tell all of the performers this: you're not performing for the camera. You're performing for the 20 people who are standing here right now live. And what that does is that really translates to the experience that you have on the video itself, rather than recording something, which I love, like KEXP in the United States makes these beautiful YouTube performances and recordings. But it's for a live audience. It's just they're on the radio, but there's no one physically in the room other than the host and the performers. Same with like Audio Tree Live, which I love watching those. And, WNYC has stuff and WFUV does stuff. But I think what really separated Tiny Desk from everything else that you see online is that there is that live audience component that just makes it seem as if, as an internet viewer, you're actually witnessing something that's happening live, but in reality, it's being created for the internet. So it's a really interesting juxtaposition.
Totally. And such a good point. And like, I never thought about it, but honestly, when I watched, and sorry, we're going to probably jump back and forth between Tiny Desk and your new project.
There's a million tangents. Million tangents. I'm sorry, I don't speak in a straight line.
Me neither. I'm interested in all these things, but we'll try to, get to the point. But like, some of my favorite Tiny Desk sessions, for example, I almost feel like I'm in the room because of the interaction that happens between the performers and the audience that's there, which really makes a difference. It wouldn't happen if they would just perform to camera, because, like, for example, two examples that I wanted to bring up here, because both are phenomenal in my opinion, is one, it's a pretty old one. It's the Milk Carton Kids, the first one from 2011 or 12 or so. It's such a good thing. It's like such a good session. And the way they interact with the people there and they talk to them, and like, it almost makes you feel like you're sitting there, you're part of it, which is really awesome. And like,
exactly
everything, that the energy, the everything that comes through, I think it would be different if it was just a camera, for sure.
Now, as a caveat, I started Tiny Desk around 2014, so that was before my time.
Okay.
However, I did record the Milk Carton Kids on another program for NPR called Ask Me Another, as a trivia show. And they brought the Ear Trumpet Labs mic, which is that iconic mic I used for the Global Sound concerts. It has such a steampunk, interesting vibe. I remember they brought it to a live performance, and they said, look, you don't take a DI. We just sing into this one large diaphragm mic. We balance our own sound. And I was like, are we sure we're going to be able to pull this off? Especially in a live venue where you have to put it through the PA. And I was really concerned about feedback loops, of course. And it just sounded beautiful. And actually, so the Milk Carton Kids introduced me to the microphone that I've chosen for Global Sound concerts, which is a really cool story. So I have been able to record them before, but of course, during the Tiny Desk that they did, I think in 2011 or 12, They didn't use that mic. I think that we still use the stereo shotgun mic that they sang around. But that was my predecessor, Kevin Waite. He's the one who came up with the idea to use shotgun mics to record the music. And then I sort of adapted that. He used the MS Stereo 418S from Sennheiser. So it's got the mid capsule and the side capsule. It can be decoded in post-production. It's got great stereo to mono compatibility, and you can control the stereo width of the image in post-production, which is very cool.
It is.
So it gives you a lot of flexibility. There's a session that I recorded with Daniel Caesar and her. Her was the special guest who came on the show at the end of his set. And, during the rehearsal, she was like right in front of the mic next to him. They were sort of squished together on either side of the stereo shotgun mic. And then, of course, when we went to film for real, he invites her on. It's a big audience. There's lots of nerves in the room. And she's literally like this to the mic. If you can hear my voice, I probably went a bit off axis. So she's singing into the side of the MS Stereo mic. And I thought it sounded terrible in my headphones because I was only monitoring the mid channel. I wasn't monitoring the side channel. And I thought, oh my gosh, do I have to stop the recording? Do I need to do this all over again? And then I looked at her proximity to the side capsule of the shotgun mic, the MS Stereo shotgun mic, and thought, you know what? I bet it sounds pretty perfect and clear in the side capsule. So in post-production, I just create another instance of the side capsule only and rode that in when she's singing. And because there wasn't a lot happening in the band, at least at the beginning of the song, it was just piano and bass, really, I was able to bring her vocal above without cranking the rest of the band, even though she was singing into the bidirectional side portion of the shotgun mic. So there's something about that MS Stereo shotgun mic that has a lot of tricks up its sleeve that I can kind of manipulate in post-production to get out of it what I might be missing.
That is awesome. That's fascinating. And it makes total sense, though. That's like, I didn't know about that. But
yeah.
I knew about the mic, but I wasn't aware that you were using it that way in those recordings. That's awesome. I think you've used that one too. I might be wrong, but I think I saw it there. There's another legendary Tiny Desk session that it's already legendary, I think, and I really love it. It's the one with Scarface and Mike Dean, which is like, I love that session so much. And that was one where
great.
I wondered.
I've got Mike Dean on speed dial because he helped me. I was working with him on the mix, and
all right.
I texted a Mike by accident, and it was Mike Dean, and I'm like, "Oh, sorry, dude, I recorded the Tiny Desk." He's like, "No problem, man." I was like, "Uh-oh." So it's kind of a funny side story.
That is funny for sure. Yeah, and it sounds phenomenal. And I was wondering, like, that is one of the, at least I assume, must be one of the more complex sessions. There's live drums in the room. There's bass. There's I think 3 guitars or something.
Yes.
And then there's Mike Dean with the synth.
Yes.
And then obviously the vocals. And everything sounds so clear. And also there's an audience, and it has to sound good for them as well. And they have to hear themselves. I didn't see like in-ears on everybody, I think.
No,
and like
they don't.
I was wondering,
Nobody
like,
uses
how'd you pull that off? Like that's crazy to me with the live drums especially.
Yeah.
And then how to make the synth work in the room. And I saw Scarface sometimes being like, turn that up, or he was like telling Mike Dean what to play. And obviously they could hear each other very well in the room.
Yes.
And like, so anything you know about that session would be appreciated if you could share it.
Sure. Well, first of all, Scarface was literally like all over the place, roaming around. He wasn't staying on mic at all. So there was a lot of work that I had to do in post-production to ride that level so that without bringing up too much of the background sound. So I had to do a fair amount of sort of like isolation of that microphone, trying to get rid of the background sound by creating another instance of it and, removing with, Isotope RX or whatever to try to isolate his vocal, compress it in such a way that even though he's moving around and he's off mic for most of the performance, you can still hear him up front and on top of everything else. That was the first challenge with that particular recording. But yeah, all the recordings that have, they'll either have, multiple guitars, they'll have a full drum kit, they might even have a string quartet. I don't remember his offhand. We can pull it up and take a look at it. But my process is, track everything as cleanly and as closely and as direct as I possibly can. If I have the ability to take a stereo out of Mike Dean's keyboards, and submix it through a stereo keyboard amp, if he's using multiple keyboards, I'll do that so that there's no bleed of any other instruments in like the keyboard tracks, for example. If I have the ability to take a direct out of an electric guitar, let's say an electric guitar is going through some sort of pedal board, and there's a line to take direct out of the pedal board in addition to miking the amp, I'll make sure I'll take that direct line out because I know there won't be any bleed of the drums in that guitar if I take the direct out. And then the rest is really communicating with the musicians in a way that they trust you. And that is a huge part of the job that I have, is to really make the musicians feel comfortable when I tell them, hey, can you use different sticks on your drums? Hey, when there's the verse and there's some quiet vocals, I really need you as a drummer to play super quietly. And then when everybody comes up and there's a louder chorus, or if it's just an instrumental break, then you can play louder. But I'm not going to have the ability to get your drum sound out of a condenser shotgun microphone because it's basically 8 inches away from the singer's mouth, which is by design. I like the sound of recording voices a little further off. I don't really like the plosive, intimate pee-popping situation when people eat vocal mics. I think it sounds unnatural and really breathy. So I actually like recording a little further away for a number of reasons. You can see the face of the performer for maybe the first time ever. If you see a lot of performers on stage or on videos, there's a mic right here, and you kind of miss what's happening. Also, when the mic is further out of the shot, it helps certainly with plosives, and it makes the voice sound more natural to me. But it also provides an opportunity to connect with the artist in a way that I don't think you normally get to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. It's fascinating. I was just wondering about exactly what you just said, where you have the distance to the performer, the vocalist, but then at the same time, drums not far away from it, which must be very loud in that microphone. So that's the challenge. Yeah,
it's crazy. Oh yeah, the other thing I'm doing in post-production is if you look at my Pro Tools sessions, for example, it's all like a checkerboard of audio. And what I'm doing is I make edit points, not to move stuff around. I make edit points in my audio, and then I mute the audio, Command M, whatever, so that you can still see the waveform underneath. But I'm only unmuting the vocals when the singers are singing. So like I have a session with, for example, with Nile Rodgers, and they're doing like Freak Out or whatever, and Shashik, whatever. They do that whole Freak Out. And but there's all these loud drumming that happens, and then they just sing very, very randomly. So if you look at the vocal line, or if you just solo my vocals, you'll just hear it go, Freak Out. Dun, 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 nothing. Shashik, Shashik. And it's like it's crazy to hear because I'm muting them every moment I possibly can, and I'm only unmuting them when they sing. So it's an incredibly labor-intensive process when I start my sessions because I want as much isolation as I can get, and maybe just leaving in the audience mics to fill it out so you don't hear things muted. Or I'll always leave the lead vocalist mic up full and then mute all my background vocals, or anything that has an acoustic mic where there's music or audio bleeding into it. I'm going through and meticulously finding exactly when they sing and don't sing, manipulating the clip gain for each individual moment, and then basically just listening to the performances and really zoning in on, what's the guitarist doing? And I don't really care if it's a verse or whatever. If someone does a cool little lick somewhere, I'll make sure I let it jump out of the mix by isolating it and either making a duplicate version of it, EQing it differently. So I'm really paying attention as a musician to manipulate the audience into hearing what I want them to hear.
Yeah, does that also mean you make like audio decisions based on what you're seeing? Like, do you have the video open when you mix to? Yes, I think that's a big part of it, right?
Yeah, well, actually, it's so interesting. I hate taking notes, so I pay very close attention during a session. and I remember where everyone's, situated. I try to zone in when certain things are happening. And then I'll take home the session and I'll mix everything the same day. So, set up the session maybe the night before and the morning of, get the musicians in, do a run through, tape the performance, and then strike everything. And then go home, 8 hours later, and then start loading everything into Pro Tools and doing a rough mix until 10 at night. And that's my process because I want it to remain fresh. I want it to remain sort of in the moment. I don't want to have to consult a bunch of notes. So that's my process. And then, I'll bounce out my rough mix, my first pass, and put it on my phone. And I'll have 10 different concerts on my phone at any one time that I'm just cycling through and listening to in different contexts, whether it's a mono speaker in my bathroom, a little Sonos speaker, or a Bluetooth speaker in my kitchen, or these nice Shure closed back headphones, or my Grado open back headphones, or my Genelec monitors, or my AirPods on my bike ride to work. And I'll sort of live with 10 of these mixes at a time on my phone, and just makes mental notes of like, oh, wow, I think that could sound better. I think I could bring something out of that the next pass. And I just keep working on it until it publishes. And then once it publishes, I can't work on it anymore. And there have been times, of course, where it publishes and I then watch it again. Like, oh, man, I wish I had done something differently. But that's also what I love about being a journalist, is that we're just making a bunch of content, and it's never supposed to be like the end-all, be-all, documentation of the recording of how it should always sound. Although a lot of my mixes end up being the most successful thing that an artist ever puts out. So it's a little scary because
it's fascinating.
That's not how I work on it. I think of it as just very ephemeral. And I would record 150 concerts a year. So it's interesting.
It totally is interesting. So that's like, our audience is primarily self-recording artists, self-recording bands, hence the title of the podcast.
Yeah.
And so they often record in situations where it's not a professional studio, it's like a jam space, it's somebody's home studio, it's like wherever. And so that's also why this was so interesting to me, like talking to you today about these situations. And the thing is, we always talk, like what we often teach people and what professionals always say is like, when you go to a professional studio, of course, we take all the time that we can to get it right at the source, and do like carefully position microphones, choose the right mics, get it all right, get the setup done. And of course, there's the mix and everything, but the more we can do at the source, the better. I assume that like something like Tiny Desk, or maybe also your new shows, there is not that much time to do that. Like you can't spend weeks doing a sound check, right? Those artists only have so much time, and then I guess it's pretty stressful often. So how do you balance that? Because I'm still pretty sure you would also love to get as much right at the beginning as you can, but there's only so much time. So how do you balance that, and how much do you have to rely on post, like you just explained, versus how much you can actually do at the source? Yeah,
I think I've learned as a journalist, you have one chance to get it right. So all of my experience leading up to Tiny Desk was recording documentary style sound for reported pieces, for host pieces, for National Geographic and NPR, to sort of run around and use these different stereo sound gathering techniques where you don't have the opportunity to say, can you go into that trance again when you're at a voodoo ritual and festival like I was in West Africa? I didn't quite get the correct level on that scream that you did that came completely organically. Or there was a section of the voodoo series that I put together. I woke up in the middle of the night and there was this thunderstorm. I'm like, oh man, I really want to get this thunderstorm. And there was only one moment where it just went whoo, whoo, whoo. And then this little bird went chirp, 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 chirp. And I remember looking at my meters and it went like all the way up the scale and like kissed the red. And I was recording on DAT tape at the time in 2004. And I was like, oh man, I hope that didn't clip. But there was no option to tell this brainstorm to take that again. So you kind of have to just go with your gut. I think that experience that I had as a journalist really prepared me to work extremely quickly to get it as good as I possibly can in the moment and to work fast. So, I don't get caught up in in just what's the word? I don't get caught up in just like, oh my God, I have to get this mic just in the right position. Okay, let's move it into the center of the cone. Okay, let's move it a little bit to the right. Okay, up, down. No, it's like, is the signal clean? Is it there? Do I have something to work with in post-production with EQ? Is it too muddy? Can I clean it up later? There are instances though where you have to just get what you need, and you need to know when those instances are, and you cannot be shy to get them. So, for example, Anderson .Paak came back to play with the Free Nationals for the second time at their tiny desk, and he was playing this great song. And during the sound check, he was right on mic, and then during the taping of the song, the mic was like, I don't know, over here. He was off mic. So I let them play through the whole song. And then after, everyone's, of course, so excited he's there. And he's not going through a PA, so no one could know but me, because I'm the one with the headphones on. I do have a small PA that I installed from Genelec, like 3 different speakers on either side of the desk, like 6 Genelec speakers. I would only send like vocals to just a little bit in case the band was just overpowering them. You wouldn't be able to even tell they were on, but you're like, oh, I can hear the vocals a little bit better because there's just a little bit of the vocal going to that PA up there at low a volume as possible. So I'm listening and he's off mic, and I remember during the applause, everyone's cheering. I literally jumped up on top of the desk and I clap along with the audience. Woo, oh my God, that was awesome. Hey, Anderson, would you mind taking that one more time? I just need to get that mic a little bit closer. So I kind of stayed with the mood and the energy of the room, and I didn't ask the producer permission. Hell no. Like, I just go like, hey, do you think they could retake this after that? And then the feeble producer might go, I'm so sorry, but like, actually, can we hold on a second, guys? Like, no, I took hold of the situation. And that's a huge part of why I think my personality, artists really trust and understand, because I'm not bashfully saying, like, I think the artists recognize when I'm doing stuff like that my only interest, and this is how it has been from the beginning, there's a lot of sensitive egos and a lot of sensitive people in the world, including like directors and videographers and whatever. And if you can express yourself in a way, that's authoritative in such a way that your only intention, and my only intention, is to make people feel like I'm trying to make it as good as it can possibly be. And I don't really give a flying fuck what your ego is. And I don't care how famous you are. If I know I can make you sound better, you should let me. And that's a super difficult balancing act, because there's major personalities. I remember David Crosby came to the tiny desk and he wanted monitors, and he wouldn't even try without, because he was late. He had an interview with one of the NPR hosts, and he arrived to the tiny desk long after soundcheck had happened. And usually soundcheck happens, privately without the audience there. He rolls up, the audience is already in place. I'm like, oh my gosh, who let the audience in? And then he's like, how the hell am I supposed to do this? And he's kind of like performing for the audience, like, I've never done this, I can't do this. And they're all laughing along. I mean, I'm like, Mr. Crosby. And then finally I just said, I will give you whatever you need and want, and I will give you a monitor right in front of your face, and I'll dial in whatever you want in it. But can you do me a huge favor and just try the first song? We've worked with the band to play super quietly. They're all listening to each other. They're standing right next to each other, singing harmony. Can we just give the first song a chance? And he sang through the first song. The audience was like, oh my God, woo. And then, of course, we just went on from there, and he was fine. Yeah. So it's a really delicate thing, managing the talent and really trying to not cave, right? I think the instinct is, wow, you're super famous and you have all this experience, and I'm just like a schmuck who works at NPR. The instinct is to, oh yeah, okay, whatever you want. Oh yeah, like whatever you want to compromise the integrity of the show. Yeah, let's do it. But like Bob Boylan, whose desk it is, who's retired just before I left the show, he was just wonderful at maintaining the integrity of the show, and he taught me so much about not caving in to artists' demands when you're trying to capture something that's different, that's outside of their comfort zone. And there's a quote that says, like, lack of limitations is the enemy of art. So in other words, we need these limitations to be good artists. And I think a lot of artists know that because they know the series. It's so successful. They like the sound that I've created, and they roll with it. But there are times when you get artists in who are just so famous, who have no idea what you are, what experience you have, and you need to convince them that you have their best interests at heart.
Yeah, totally. I can imagine there's big differences there. You've, by the way, with all you just said, you've answered, I think, a couple of the questions already that we got in advance, which is awesome. So Paul, he's in the chat. He's a singer-songwriter from the US. He asked a couple of questions in advance. Paul Robb, shout out to you. He says, he asked for anecdotes in like Tiny Desk moments, which you already shared a couple, which is amazing. And then he says, which is totally on that topic now, he says, one thing I've noticed is that artists often bring something unexpected to their Tiny Desk performances, something straying from the usual material or format. How much of that is decided during pre-production planning? And do artists have clear ideas about controlling the sound environment, or do they rely more on the engineer, which you basically just answered? It's like sometimes they have a clear idea, but then yours might be better.
Yeah.
So he said, as an example, I noticed that Alicia Keys moved her mic during her concert and asked a production question about whether to keep things clean or have music playing behind her, suggesting a level of spontaneity. So how common is this, he asks, that like spontaneous things like that happen during the show?
Yeah, it was because of the setup and her piano and everything, it was difficult to get to her, to adjust her mic for her, which I've done on countless Tiny Desks. So I asked her, I'm like, would you mind switch? So and that was an instance where I only had 16 channels. It was before I upgraded the Tiny Desk system from Sound Devices. I had two 788Ts, which are basically these field recorders that I would link together with a C-Link cable so that Word Clock could lock them together, and they would record to two separate compact flash cards that I would then transfer. And then I upgraded to the Scorpio from Sound Devices, which can handle up to 32 channels, and it's on one SD card, so much easier. But at the time, I was limited to 16 inputs. Otherwise, I would have had, the three different mic positions that she did for her concert, one at the piano, one at the desk, and I don't know if she had a third one. Maybe it was just two. So I would have had two separate lines with two mics, if I had enough channels. But because I was maxed out and I wanted to make sure I captured everything that I possibly could as best as I possibly could, I needed to use the same channel for her vocal mic, which meant unplugging it and unplugging the line and plugging it into the other mic because I only had that one line available. So I could have climbed over the desk and changed it for her. But I basically was like, it's kind of be a pain in the ass for me to get over there. Would you mind being your own roadie? She's like, yeah, I can handle this. And I love that because I really appreciate that it just humanizes her so much, right? It's like, oh, whatever. She goes to the bathroom too. She could change her own mic position as well, right? Like it's the same kind of concept. And I love that sort of scrappy attention to detail that we do at Tiny Desk. But there are instances where, like, for example, the Lumineers, I brought them in and I produced that show, and they wanted to play back a cassette tape. So as sort of like this ambient bed that they had recorded in the woods with their iPhones, and then they transferred the file to a computer, and then they dubbed it on cassette, right? Because they thought that'd be cute. Sure, great. So we had the cassette playing on top of the piano in a little cassette player with a speaker, and I could have taken the line out, but I think I just mic'd the speaker as if it was an amp, and who cares, right? So this was like this hissy cassette. And then in post-production, I can put on a stereo imager and turn it into this kind of like weird stereo ambient bed with tape hiss. And I like that. So there are acts that think about it ahead of time. I remember Tuxedo was another band with Mayor Hawthorne and Gavin. I forgot her name. Anyway, they had a drum machine And they had it on cassette as well. And I did a very similar thing. They brought a little cassette player. I also have a little cassette player with a speaker. And rather than taking the line out and running it through another speaker, I just mic'd the little boombox, right? So there are certain spontaneous, and I don't think I knew about that ahead of time. They just brought it day of, and I have to think on my feet and figure out how I want to accomplish whatever it is that they're bringing. Same with...
how much time do you have to make for those decisions? Sorry to jump in there, but like, how much time is there actually to do sound check and setup and all of that? Like for us who don't know what's going on behind the scenes.
It depends on the show. Some bands need to rehearse the day before, but most of the time, band arrives at noon. We kind of plug everything in sound check to 12:30. We do a run through at 1, and then take a 10-minute break, and we tape at 1:30, and we're done at 2. So we're noon to 2.
Wow.
On average. Yeah. It's super quick. And I love that. It's just sort of like the journalistic kind of, that's a very sort of comes from journalism background. It's not the meticulous studio prep that everyone might be used to. It's a much more like run and gun situation. Like we're just capturing something that's happening in real time as journalists, rather than we are documenting something for the end of time as the official record. So I think that's the difference in the terms of the mentality.
Yeah. I agree, but do you think that we can take some of that still and like maybe apply it to studio recordings or the home recordings as well to our own benefit? Because with the home recording thing is one of the biggest problems in my opinion is, and that goes back to the limitations thing, is that we basically don't have any limitations really. I mean, we might not have the best rooms and all that, but we have unlimited time more than anything. And we can have all the plugins and options in the DAW in the world. We can iterate forever. There's no real deadlines. And like sometimes that is not a good thing. And so can we take some of that mentality and mindset that you have to apply to these sessions and use that also when we work on our own music at home?
Sure. Yeah, I think, recording things live as a band, like let's say you have 3 or 4 people at once, rather than tracking each person individually, and not relying on overdubs as much, maybe just try to capture everything live. It would be a good first step, everybody playing together live in a room. That could be a really interesting, quick way to sort of think about it. Other than that, I don't know. Show up to your friend's home studio. Don't do it in your own home studio. Go to someone else's. Maybe that can inspire some last-minute creativity.
Yeah, and then also I like one quote that I've read of you where you said, when it comes to like I think it was in an interview that you gave or an article or something like that, where it was about finding the right mic positions quickly and stuff. And you just said basically move your head around until it sounds good and then replace your head with a mic, which is such good advice. And we can always do that ourselves too. And it doesn't have to take forever. Sometimes people ask me like, where should I put this mic? And I'm like, and that's pretty much often what we say is like, where does it sound the best? Like, have you listened to the different spots?
Yeah, sure.
And
yeah, I remember when Yo-Yo Ma brought his like $20 million cello in. I didn't know where to mic it. I was like, what am I going to do? I didn't want to clip anything to it because it was too expensive. So I wasn't going to put on a DPA or anything. But I had a mic, and I have the stereo shotgun mic to kind of pick up his voice in a bit of the room. And then I had the binaural KU100 head in the air. So that's going to pick up a further distance. But I wanted a real up-close guttural sound. I wanted to make Yo-Yo Ma's cello not like you've ever heard it before, right? In this beautiful concert hall with all this lush reverb on it. No, I wanted to make Yo-Yo Ma's cello sound like shit. Yeah. Kinda, you know what I mean? Like, or just different. I wanted to really get into the guts of it because he can play very aggressively. And I really wanted to hear that really guttural, like scratchy, it's called like the working tone. Some people have called that before. So I actually, I got down on my knees and I kind of like put my ear around and I'm like, ooh, it sounds super gritty right there. And I just grabbed a MKH40 cardioid condenser microphone and I stuck it right too close, right? I put it too close. But I used that mic for most of that recording. I put a stereoizer on it. I did some, what is that called? Dynamic compression, that kind of thing. And some reverb, a little bit, not much. And I actually love how sort of like guttural and not Yo-Yo Ma sound that I got out of that. Even though I could have put on a lot more reverb, or I could have used the mics that were a little further back. I like that I chose that super intimate, in-your-face recording where you can really hear him grunting and screeching across his strings. And it's not necessarily like a beautiful sound, but it definitely hits you in the gut. And that's really what I'm after when I'm making my recordings, is if I'm recording someone who's famous, like why record it in a way that you've heard them a million times? Why not try to create a new experience, like as a journalist? And that's always my intent.
And I think with all you said there and before also, you've beautifully explained actually why Tiny Desk is so successful also, I think, or why it resonates so much with people, because it is different and because of that connection with the audience and the intimacy. And like, if you were trying to just do the same or get as close as possible to the record or whatever, it wouldn't be the same, I think. I think that's probably the secret.
No.
Like, it's like...
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's the last thing I want to do is try to make a recording.
Cool.
I don't really have a lot of interest in recording studio stuff because of my background as a journalist, as a theater person. I'm much more interested in the ephemeral, there it is, and then it's gone. And capturing a moment in time rather than trying to perfect something, because there's something that happens in terms of all of us as humans, like keeping the subtle mistakes, keeping the tempo that isn't quite perfect, keeping the singer who gets a slightly off pitch because they're singing so passionately. I think the Carolyn Polachek one is amazing. She sings incredibly, and I just love recording and mixing her because even though she was just very all over the place and free form and expressing herself, physically as well as, audibly. And I loved trying to sort of like match the audio and post-production to her physical representation of herself. And I thought that came out so fun and so great. And what's wonderful about it is that it's not perfect. And I think that's something that we can all relate to as human beings, is to sort of embrace the warts, as I said in another interview once.
I like that. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. So before we go to a few questions I have about the new show that you do, one more thing here is Paul says, again, he says, I've noticed a variety of miking techniques across different Tiny Desk performances. And I'm curious about how much of that is pre-planned versus decided on the spot. And I think that's a great question because I thought about that too. I mean, over the years, with all these sessions that you've done, you have quite the tool belt, right? All the different techniques you could use, and you probably know when you see something or who's coming in. You probably have an idea of like what could work in that situation. But do you actually do it that way, that you're looking at like who's coming in, what do they bring? Like, okay, I'm going to prepare this or that, or do you do it all on the spot when they're in the room?
Yeah, it used to be very unprepared. And then one of the things that I would be adamant about, because what would happen is the artists would come in, they'd set up, and then the video director would say, I don't like this. Everybody move around. Like, this is a nightmare. We all need to be on the same page. So now I requested to the video producer, okay, let's do a stage plot. Put them where you would like them. We send it to them. They can say, actually, we can't do it like that because I'm always on their left and I'm always on their right. And can we just do it a little differently? And then finally, we kind of have a consensus. So when I was preparing like my musical theater stuff, whether it was Hadestown or The Lion King or Blue Man Group or Six, I knew, like, for example, in Six, there were 6 queens. And at first, I had it set up where it was like, there was a main mic for the main singer to go to. And then they said, no, all the queens are treated equally. So in that instance, I chose to use 3 stereo mics for the 6 queens and kind of had each pair share one. And if they were singing the solo, get into the middle of the stereo shotgun mic. And then I wouldn't pan it like from left to right. I would still pan the stereo mics left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. And that's another thing about panning. I would take all kinds of creative license. So let's say the horn section was on the left side of the screen. Other mixers at Tiny Desk would pan everything left, and I don't think that sounds interesting or good. So I would still pan, let's say there was a trumpet player on the left and a sax player on the right. I would still pan them left and right in the stereo image rather than having them all to the left side of the screen, because I find it's much more interesting so that when there's a tight shot of the horn section, audibly it makes sense. It's like, oh yeah, the trumpet's on the left and the sax is on the right. But when you see the wide shot, they're all on the left side, but you'll still hear the imaging the way I have it in relation to each other rather than in relation to the whole set.
That's interesting. So many things to think of. And it goes back to the visual, like the audio decisions based on the video. Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes. And I won't be mixing with the video in my session because the video people were always just like so slow to get me anything. And I just couldn't rely on them. So I want to work quickly. I have a lot to do. I want to do it while it's fresh. So I wouldn't even take the video feed. I would just think of it and mix it soon after. But then, of course, I would watch my mix with the video edit and then do one more pass where I am making changes to, let's say, pan positions or, oh, wow, I couldn't quite hear that cymbal. I didn't even realize they were tapping it so quietly. So I'll go back into my mix and crank it really loud because I didn't notice that it wasn't emphasized enough because I didn't know what the edit was going to be, the video edit. And these video editors are making decisions, not necessarily knowing anything about, none of them are music people.
I mean, I can't tell you the amount of times where like artists that I've worked with at the studio got a video done and then they sent it to me and then the music is mono. And I'm like, how did nobody ever notice that? Like that happens so often, you'd be surprised. It's like,
yes, it's nuts. Yeah, I was just working on a short film and, all the sources were there, left, right, mix, boom, and law of 1, 2, 3, 4. And the editor cut everything from left mix. So not only was it mono, which is fine, but it was all the 4 lavs and the boom mixed together. And I had no control over isolating who was talking when, which defeats the whole purpose of multi-tracking it. And they had no clue. And I was like, so I had to go back in for the most egregious part. It would have taken forever because there's multiple cuts and multiple takes, and they're using one take from this scene and another take from this scene. And I had to go into the original audio and just find the most egregious stuff, find the person who was talking, pull it into my session, resync it up, just isolate that one mic. And what would have taken 2 days took a week. It's just... Yeah.
Painful.
You got to educate your people, folks. Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah, totally. So, all right, for everyone in the chat here, we might have Josh here for another 10 minutes or so. So if you have questions, please just put them in there. Let me know. And while you're doing that, I want to go back to the Global Sound concerts real quick, because I've watched the Mexico session that you sent me in advance. And
oh yeah, so you saw the whole episode because I haven't released any full episodes yet. I've only released like my little teaser trailer of the 6 episodes I've shot so far. And I'm about to go to Australia next month, and then I'm going to be going hopefully to Turkey, Bulgaria, and Georgia. And I'm also hoping to go. I'll be in Chile in December, and then. Doing one in Richmond, Virginia, doing one in Boston, Massachusetts. So I've got a lot coming because I want to release them kind of like as a pilot season once they're all done.
Well, yeah.
But yes, please, you were saying you looked at the Mexico City one, which you got to see in full, but no one else has yet.
I know, yeah. And so just tell me if we can't talk about certain things, and I won't spoil anything.
No, it's no problem.
The one thing I was so interested in, though, is, again, it sounds fantastic. And I was looking at the video, and I think I didn't see any, if I remember correctly, it didn't seem like there's any like close mics on those guitars, but it also didn't sound like the typical DI pickup sound that I don't really like for acoustic guitars. It sounded really great.
Yes.
There was separation between vocal and guitar, or like at least it sounded good.
Yeah.
I didn't hear anything of the typical phasing problems you sometimes hear. And again, it was not the typical plasticky, hard, top-end transient DI sound, So how did you do that? Like, because that was fascinating. It sounded like there was a mic at the guitar. I didn't see one, though, so yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think a big part of that, thank you, is, well, first of all, there were nylon strings, so they'll sound a little bit more forgiving, I think, than steel string on a DI. They were DI'd, but those particular pickups, I think, had like a mic piezo kind of combo. So even though I was plugged in directly, it was a little bit better sounding, but it still sounded like a DI. Trust me.
Yeah.
And then I think because I had their large diaphragm condenser mics weren't right here, they were a little further back. So they actually kind of were in between the guitar and the vocals. So a fair amount of guitar sound was being picked up by that large diaphragm ear trumpet lab mic. And then the direct
You just embrace the bleed, basically.
Yeah, and embrace the bleed. I love it. I love it. And it also picked up the natural reverb of the room, but I also had some mics set up in the room to pick up the reverb. So I wasn't adding any artificial reverb. I was just dialing in like my room mics because that place sounded incredible. The Park de Coatzacoalcos in Mexico City. Stunning. Wow. Oh my God. That was such a dream location. And I picked it and I didn't know how I was going to do it. And then as luck would have it, the artist was really interested in doing it there, which was awesome. And we couldn't get permission because it wasn't really open to the public, but he happened to know a photographer who worked there. And miraculously, she got us permission, at the last minute. We show up, it's pouring rain. I'm like, I guess we have to do it inside. And this was one of the only locations that was inside. The park is huge and beautiful and romantic and stunning.
Yeah.
But it all just sort of like fell into line magically at the last minute. And that's how a lot of this stuff would happen in journalism, especially. It's like either it magically all happens or it totally doesn't. There's not much in between.
Yeah.
I had just been giving a 3-day workshop at at Tec de Monterrey, which is, they have 6 campuses all over Mexico City of like basically film and video and audio production. And I gave my presentation and I got whisked off in an Uber because everything was running an hour late with the presentations. And, I showed up and we got there just in time to meet the artist. And it's just like everything fell into place. It was just amazing. But yeah, in terms of the DI as well, I'm also doing some trickery, some sorcery in post-production with the DIs that I am capturing. I'm putting on like a stereoizer so that it doesn't sound so just like dead, direct mono. It sounds a little bit more natural, like we have 2 ears, so how we would hear it naturally. So I am doing some manipulation to those DIs to make them sound more realistic. And then other times I also would clip on like a tiny little DPA mic either on the sound hole. And I also have like, the DPA 4099s I've used and the Neumann MCM, what are they called? MCM 113s or I can't remember, but they have these little systems where you can have a mic that's sort of a little bit nicer sounding as long as you don't have a lot of bleed. It can sound really good.
Yeah, awesome. That's so cool. And I love the fact that there is actually from this ear trumpet mic that there's a lot of bleed in it as well, which is, I assume that would be the case.
Yeah, you're getting a lot of the room in there and you're getting a balance between the guitar and the vocal that's a little more natural. I appreciate that so much because also you can see the performer's face the whole time because the mic's down here and because those ear trumpet labs you can actually pivot the capsule. You can kind of focus it in whatever direction you want because it's on that little pivot. So I appreciate those mics for a number of reasons. Plus they're round so they can turn into the globe, which is the whole purpose of them. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think those mics do that kind of job particularly well at a little bit of a distance. I know that one of our coaching students here, Greg from Canada, he's a bluegrass artist and he uses one of those mics when they do live sessions with like, they just stand around this mic with the upright bass and mandolin and the guitar and banjo and whatnot. And like, and the vocals as well. And I've heard these recordings and I was often surprised by how good this sounds at a distance, like capturing multiple things at once or like, it's like a very cool.
Right.
Yeah.
Like the way bluegrass musicians record with that one, large diaphragm mic at a distance. I mean, that's how they used to do it on all these old radio shows. There'd be like one RCA ribbon mic and everyone singing around it, including behind it because it's bidirectional.
Yeah.
So like AEA is a company that I love. They're sort of resurrecting old school ribbon mic technology. I actually have this Bloomian mic right here.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite drum room mics. Close drum room mics, awesome.
Yeah, you can use it overheads or room, or you can just have people singing around it, and it's
fantastic.
It's a beautiful, passive, needs a lot of clean gain to sound good. But it's stunning. I love mics that have personality.
Sure.
Because otherwise, life's too short to futz around with boring mics. But to that point, give me 16 channels of audio to do a tiny desk. Give me 16 SM57s, and I can probably make it sound just as good.
I'm so glad you're saying that.
Anything else I've done.
I'm so glad you're saying that. Yeah, there's hope for the home recording people. Yeah. No.
Oh God, yeah. It's all a joke. As long as you have good, clean signal gain and good mic placement, and unfortunately you have to spend some money to get some good mic preamps, because that can make a big difference. In terms of getting nice, clean gain to power-hungry dynamic mics.
Or at least something like a cloud lifter or something in between where you get a few dBs of extra clean gain, stuff like that. Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. Thank you so much.
But it doesn't have to be expensive.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be expensive.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're saying that. I mean, it's cool to have tools that inspire us. And if we can do it, why not, right? Like you said, life is too short to just, if you can, why not? But if you can't.
If you can afford it, exactly. I'm looking at Genelec monitors. I'm looking at a Sound Devices field recorder. I'm looking at Grado, open ear, like not the cheapo ones. Yeah. But that's just because this is my livelihood.
Exactly.
But honestly, you don't need it. You really don't.
So cool. Thank you for answering all of this. Marcus from the chat here, Marcus Kaiser, he's also in our community here, in the coaching community. He says, "Hey, Josh, just curious how an established person in the music industry like you learned all the audio stuff. How did you start? How did you develop your skills? Was there some education you took part in, or was it just learning by doing?"
That's a great question. I started as a musician, like most audio engineers probably do. I would write my own songs on guitar and sing. And I had a friend in the theater that I was working at, and he had a Tascam 424 cassette-based multi-track Porta Studio. So I got one as a birthday gift. I think it was $500, which back then was a lot of money. I don't know what it is in today's dollars. A bunch. And I got it as a gift, and it enabled me to record myself and overdub guitar parts and overdub harmony. And then I got a Alesis MIDI Verb 4 because it had an aux send and a return, so that I could actually dial in some effects and some reverb. I could bounce track to track like Beatles style, and then have this luscious, beautiful recording on a 4-track Porta Studio. Now it's like I have this teenage engineering OP1, and one of the simulators built into it is 4-track, Porta Studio or whatever, to get that same shitty analog hiss that we were all complaining about not too long ago, to reinstate it, which is kind of hilarious to me. But
yeah. So
I kind of caught the bug, so to speak, for audio production by using that cassette-based Porta Studio. And then I got 3 hours of recording studio time as another birthday gift or a graduation gift from my parents. Went to the local recording studio. They were recording on an Alesis ADAT 8-channel, like you put in a VCR tape or something in that thing, and it's just like a digital-based recorder. And then, I brought my guitar and I sang my original songs. And they made it sound pretty sweet, except I remember I was shaking my leg, and you can hear this thump of me keeping the tempo, shaking my leg. And the audio engineer, I guess, at the time is, "Hey, I can hear your leg thumping," but I can hear it now all these years later. It's so funny. And then I went to school at Ithaca College, upstate New York. I wanted to do theater, or I wanted to do communications, audio production, and they had a good theater school, a good music school, a good communication school. I didn't know what I wanted to major in. And then the more I got into theater, I was like, I did theater my whole life growing up. Why am I going to debt in college to study something I've already been doing? Let's pick something else that I also love. And that was audio production. And at the time, it was just the communication school that had, intro to broadcast production, advanced audio production. We were multi-tracking at that time to those Tascam, are they called 888s? I don't even remember. But they were just like the Tascam version of the Alesis tape-based multi-track. ADAT, or the Alesis ADAT, yeah. And But they had like a patch bay and external gear, like a space echo and like an Orban paragraphic EQ. And so I learned the basics there. And then they showed us Pro Tools. And I did my final project, which was actually doing sound for a cartoon, a children's television show as part of the television station at Ithaca. And I did my final project in Pro Tools, and I thought it was so cool because I got the machine control in Pro Tools to actually control the beta videotape. So every time I moved my cursor in Pro Tools, the tape would shuffle to that location. And I just thought that was the coolest freaking thing ever. Graduated, ended up doing some theater stuff, and then would walk by NPR every day on my way to the theater and thought, oh, I should apply for a job there. I used to listen to the radio going to college. And as soon as I got a gig there, freelancing, I said, where's the digital audio workstation? Where's Pro Tools? Where's whatever? Nuendo. And they're like, yeah, we're still on analog tape. And they were for another 5 years. So I was cutting everything on 1/4 inch, reel-to-reel analog tape at 15 inches per second, 7.5 inches per second. And all of the gear to fix bad audio, which was usually from reporters all over the world. And this is how I learned how to use EQ and compression and peak notch filters. Basically, my processing chain, which was all analog gear, was like a Uri peak notch filter going into Orban paragraphic EQ going into a DBX 160 compressor. And those were all the tools that I had to clean up shitty tape. And I'm so grateful because I got to dial those, analog knobs thousands and thousands of times. And I learned very quickly that it didn't really matter what position they were in as long as it sounded good, right? And that's when I really learned to use my ears and just twist the dials till it sounded better, right? And then, once everything transitioned into digital, I kind of had a better grasp of like not being overwhelmed by all the different settings and features and presets, and just hearkening back to the 3 parameters I had available to me on a DBX 160 compressor and recognizing that tool could do anything.
Awesome. Yeah, that's so cool. And and I mean, with that experience and all those things you had to do like the little things you had to troubleshoot, or like the tools you had available to troubleshoot and clean up things, and like how you had to come up with solutions to still get it done. I think that also equipped you very well for the stuff you did later on, where you have to, in a stressful situation with not much time, you just have to find a solution, trust your ear, trust your intuition, your instinct, and just go with it.
No, it's true.
And be okay with it, right?
One of the studios at NPR was a little wired differently than the other one, and the patch bay was different. And I remember this producer came in and said, this story is on the radio for millions of listeners in 3 minutes. We have no time. Just go through, mix it. I don't really care what it sounds like. We need to get it out. And I remember there was some muddy sounding like reporter tracks. Like it just sounded like they were talking like this. So of course I was patching in my EQ and was rolling off all the low end on my peak notch filter or whatever, just to like get it not muddy. And it wasn't doing anything. I was like twisting the knob, nothing's happening. And then the producer was like, no, just go. And then finally I just did it. Mix went out. She grabbed it. She put it on the air. She came back in, oh my God, thank you so much. Followed by the technical director of All Things Considered. He came in and said, what was up with those tracks? They sounded so muddy. And I was like, yeah, I couldn't figure out why my peak notch filter wasn't doing anything. And he was like, oh yeah, the patch bay is different in here than it is next door. So I had the 2 patch points. Yeah. I didn't have them patched correctly because I had them patched how it is in the exact same studio with all the exact same gear right next door. And so it's like you learn all these little things. Even though the producer was super pleased, the technical director was like, why were those tracks so muddy? So it's really interesting.
Yeah.
It all has to do with signal flow and routing and getting all your shit together.
It's the basics.
It's all the same.
Even in the digital, like I always say, like if you've ever operated even just a small analog desk, that teaches you so much about basic signal flow. You can use that even like in the DAW. Like people who've used that have an easier time learning how everything works usually, because signal comes in at the top, goes down at the bottom through the fader to wherever it's routed to. And once you understand that concept, it makes everything so much easier.
Yeah.
And then
No, it's true.
Do we have time for one more question before you gotta leave?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, let's
So
do it.
Manel from Spain, he's also in the Self-Recording Syndicate, and he says, hello, little question. 800 tiny desks, I think, is more than enough to change you in so many ways. So my question is, could you tell us about a couple important things that have evolved in the way you approach this kind of projects and recordings? So have these 800 sessions changed you in some ways, or your approaches?
I guess so. I mean, it's all yes and no. I think everything's the same in terms of trusting myself as a musician and my ear. None of that has changed at all. I think, I guess it just has to do with taking life a little less seriously, recognizing that, yeah, you're only as good as your last recording. I guess that's one way to say it. But also, if you have a bad day, it's okay, because you're going to just do it again tomorrow, hopefully, right? So, or if you have a great day, that doesn't mean your next session is going to go perfectly. So I think it's just taught me to be humble and to approach it from a place of objectivity and just recognizing that you're just trying to capture a moment in time, and you're not trying to make the final record of anything. We're all just sort of living in this world and experiencing, and this is just another vessel or venue to share the human experience together and to celebrate it.
Awesome. I love that. I love that so much. Thank you. So what can we expect in terms of the global sound concerts, as well as the Ghost Lights show that you're doing? Like what can we expect?
Yeah,
like when things
concerts,
are Ghost Light concerts? Yeah. When is it going to be released? And where can we send people to if they want to check it out or want to check out the teasers, trailers, keep them in the loop and stuff? Like where should we send people to?
I'm about to get very busy again, recording a lot more content, really just making it from a place of discovery and sharing art that I think matters. I have absolutely no backing or funding or distributors or collaborators. I'm just making stuff that I love. And I think that's so cool that after a 24-year career in doing audio for other people and other organizations to make them successful, I'm just making stuff that I like. And if that leads to something, great. And if it doesn't, I'm fine with that too. So right now, I do have globalsoundconcerts.com and ghostlightconcert.com, and I'm working on getting ghostlightconcerts.com. But I think the best way to really find out about anything that I'm doing is follow me on Instagram at Josh Rogosin. You can also follow at Global Sound Concerts on Instagram and Facebook. And then the YouTube channel is probably going to be the most important place where if I don't find, if Netflix or Apple doesn't contact me and say, hey, we want to distribute your stuff exclusively, which I highly doubt happening. I think, I'm kind of going with the gut feeling of I need to just release stuff as a pilot season, and we'll see if anybody gives a shit. So let me know if you give a shit. That would be awesome to hear. I'm going to be, Global Sound Concerts. I guess it's youtube.com/ I don't even know. Just search for Global Sound Concerts on YouTube. I've got a teaser reel up there of the 6 episodes I've shot so far, kind of cut together with some talking in between, because it's really all about connecting with musicians, learning about where they're from and why being from that place inspires them to make music. I don't want it just to be a bunch of music behind a desk. I want it to have a little bit more meat, a little bit more context, a little bit more, curiosity, and a little bit more of a global reach. So, let me know what you think about Global Sound Concerts and Ghostlight Concerts, which is really going to be highlighting different venues all over the world. So that if you can't get to the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C., for example, maybe you can watch an episode of Ghostlight Concerts that will inspire you to come to Washington to see what kind of performers come through there, just to celebrate art and music and comedy and plays. It doesn't even have to be restricted to music. And that's what I'm thinking about the Ghostlight series, covering everything. That's not just music.
That's so cool. Yeah, we're going to put all of that in the show notes, of course. And yes, people, please check it out and let Josh know what you think about it. Let him know if you give a shit, like you said, because
Exactly. Because there's a lot of content out in the world. How do you distinguish yourself? I don't know. I'm just going to make stuff that I like and see if it resonates. That's it. And I think, that's how Tiny Desk started in 2008, long before I was at the show. I was certainly in public broadcasting. I met Bob Boylan long before that. We worked together for years and years. But he just kind of put it up on his blog post and with the same attitude. Let's see if anybody gives a shit. And it took a really long time. I think it took until Anderson .Paak there were a couple of hits along the way. Certainly, I think the first big one was Adele, and that kind of went bonkers. And then the next big one was T-Pain. And then once I started, we went with Anderson .Paak and Mac Miller and Alicia Keys and Blue Man Group, and all of those iconic shows just came fast and furious. And now everyone's clamoring to get on the show, and for some reason I left. I think that's also something to say as some advice to everyone who's listening. You might think you have the coolest job in the world, and of course I did. But there's always more to learn. You have to continue to grow. And if that means, leaving the best job you've ever had, guess what? I have a better job now. It's incredible. I love going out into the world and all the different excitement that people have when I tell them what I'm doing, and all the different creative artists who want to be a part of it. That is just the biggest blessing of all.
Wow. Yeah, so beautiful. Thank you for that. Great advice right there. And so, all right, if you want to check all that out, it's in the show notes. You're going to find it if you go to theselfrecordingband.com/226, which is the number of this episode 226. So
lucky 226.
Exactly. So go there, find the links to Josh's social media and everything we just mentioned, and check out these things. I think these are very, very exciting projects, and there's something to be learned here for sure. Like sometimes we have to take risks or do what we are excited about, and not so much care about whether or not other people might like it. You never know, anyways. And if it resonates with you, there might be other people like you, and you never know. You just got to hit the publish button at some point. That's the thing. And so
I think so.
Yeah. So thank you so much for sharing that. That's very inspiring. All right, cool, Josh.
Thank you, Benedict.
Thank you for your time. Really, thank you so much. This was a very, very cool session. Lots to learn from this. I'm going to check out a bunch of these Tiny Desk sessions now again. And with the knowledge that I now have, I might see it differently or hear it differently. So that's awesome.
Yes. And feel free to drop into my DMs, so to speak, on Instagram or otherwise, to say hello. Or if you have any specific questions, I got no secrets, folks. I'm happy to share whatever knowledge I've acquired. I'm more than happy to share. So keep in touch and have fun out there.
Awesome. Thank you. And also thank you for listening. Thank you for joining us in the chat here. Thank you for the great questions. And we'll see you next time. So bye all, and bye Josh. Thank you.
Thank you.